Let's talk about Sophie Cunningham. Her latest episode of the Show Me Something podcast, go subscribe, has come out, and she keeps it real about the state of the team defensively. She also talks about the Alyssa Thomas, Caitlin Clark fiasco and what the hell's going on in the league. Like, why does she keep getting targeted? And she also slams the league for not marketing Caitlin Clark.
A current player still drawing a paycheck from her own league just walked into a podcast studio and set everything on fire. Sophie Cunningham didn't dance around it, didn't soften it, didn't play the diplomatic game that's supposed to keep paychecks flowing and fines away. She grabbed the microphone and told her league exactly what it's doing wrong, knowing full well there's probably a fine coming for saying it out loud. And here's the wild part. She was completely right about almost all of it, which is exactly why people are losing their minds over this entire situation.
During real time last night, I did not see that happen. I don't, none of our team saw it happen, because I promise you if we would have seen that happen, we would have had her back. Unfortunately, this type of shit happens every single game to her, and the league and the refs do absolutely nothing about it.
The episode dropped on her Show Me Something podcast, and instead of the usual safe player talk that keeps everyone comfortable and employed, she torched three massive issues at once without hesitation. Caitlin Clark is getting physically targeted every single game, and the refs are watching it happen and doing absolutely nothing about it. The league put out a 30-year anniversary poster that somehow managed to leave off the single biggest name in the entire sport while including players who would be the first to admit they're not the draw Clark is. And her own team's defense is so broken that people are seriously questioning whether the coaching staff even understands what they're supposed to be doing anymore. That's not just a rant. That's a complete breakdown of everything that's currently wrong with the WNBA right now. Let's start with the thing that had the internet completely lose it, the moment that blew everything up. Caitlin Clark is being hunted, not metaphorically, actually hunted on the court. Players on opposing teams are targeting her specifically, knowing that they can get away with it because the officiating in this league has completely and utterly failed her. Sophie didn't use flowery language or dance around this either. She said it flat out, point blank, no apologies. This type of stuff happens every single game to her, she said on the podcast, and the league and the refs do absolutely nothing about it. Those words carry serious weight because Sophie sees it happening in real time. She's on the court watching it unfold night after night, and she's admitting that the pattern is so consistent and so deliberate that it's basically become a game plan for opposing teams now.
We have a generational talent and a WNBA superstar who had two cheap shots right there that weren't called. And I just say again, absolutely unacceptable.
You see the videos of Alyssa Thomas, like literally kneeing and cheap shotting C in the throat. Like, if she did that to any of our teammates, we'd be pissed. They're definitely targeting her, and the league and the refs do nothing to protect her.
People are fucking rough with her. Like, there's no other way around it. Does that fuck with you guys as a team, or is that just an incident that becomes a much bigger deal on the internet than it does during real time?
During real time last night, I did not see that happen. None of our team saw it happen, because I promise you if we would have seen that happen, we would have had her back. Unfortunately, this type of shit happens every single game to her, and the league and the refs do absolutely nothing about it.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
The specific incident that lit this entire match and started everything burning was the Fever game against the Phoenix Mercury on June 24th. During that game, Alyssa Thomas didn't just make incidental contact with Clark. She drove her fist directly into Clark's throat. We're talking about a shot that would draw immediate ejection if it happened in virtually any other professional sport on the planet. But in this game, at this specific moment with these officials, the refs saw absolutely nothing. No whistle, no flagrant, no acknowledgement whatsoever. The game just kept moving like a player didn't just get physically targeted in a way that could potentially cause serious injury. It took hours, actual hours, for the league to even acknowledge the incident happened. And it only happened then because the clip went viral and the internet refused to let the moment disappear quietly into the background. Here's where the punishment becomes the absolute punchline to a joke nobody wanted to hear. After reviewing the footage in the safety of the league office, after the damage was already done and the internet had already seen it spread everywhere, the league upgraded it to a flagrant 2 and decided to hand Alyssa Thomas a 1-game suspension and a $1,000 fine. $1,000. These are professional athletes making serious money, drawing 6-figure salaries, and the league's message for throwing a fist at another player's throat is basically sit one game out and donate some couch cushion money. If the goal was to protect players and send a message that this kind of targeting won't be tolerated, the message got completely lost somewhere between the league office and the court. And the timing of all of this is absolutely everything. A flagrant 2 called in the moment in real time during the game means automatic ejection. Game over, player gone, no debate. But because the officials standing right there on the court saw absolutely nothing, Thomas finished the entire game like nothing happened. She wasn't held accountable until after thousands of people online made it literally impossible to ignore. The system didn't catch it. The system got embarrassed into catching it after the fact, after going viral, after the damage was done. Players around the league noticed that difference. It matters, it changes how they play and how they approach the game. But here's the thing that really gets under Sophie's skin and made her go off. The throat shot wasn't even the only dangerous play Clark had to deal with during that same night. On a 3-point attempt, Phoenix's Valerian Idy didn't give her clean landing space. She actively took away her feet. Clark came down on Idy's foot, crumpling to the floor immediately and grabbing her back in pain. They called a personal foul, sure, but they refused to upgrade it to a reckless closeout even though you could see she was genuinely hurt on impact. So in one single game, the biggest star in the entire sport absorbed a cheap shot to the throat and a dangerous landing situation where an opponent actively took away her space, and the officiating crew treated both moments like they were just normal basketball happening. Clark ended up missing the next game because of the back injury with no timetable given for return. That's not an injury scare. That's a legitimate absence caused by unprotected play. Sophie wasn't alone in going completely nuclear over the situation either. Fever head coach Stephanie White, who's supposed to be a defensive expert and a serious voice in this league, went public immediately and called the whole thing absolutely unacceptable without hesitation. She pointed out to the media that they have a generational talent who took 2 cheap shots that weren't called, and she said the lack of protection was a complete failure of the system. When your bench guard and your head coach are both publicly torching the officiating in the same week, going on record about it, that's not 2 isolated hot takes from frustrated people. That's a locker room that's collectively decided they've had enough of watching one player get targeted and hunted with 0 consequences. The frustration isn't random, it's organized, it's coordinated, it's undeniable.
And she also slams the league for not marketing Caitlin Clark. You know, we was talking about that poster, and yeah, there is potentially a thing involving licensing as to why she's not on that poster. But I did get to thinking about something else that made me go, well, hold on now. Diana Taurasi's not on there. Candace Parker's not on there. Sue Bird is not on. If you're doing a 30th anniversary, why are those guys? It's so random. Even Sophie's like, why the fuck am I on this calendar or this poster? Why am I on there? You know, it doesn't make any sense. Why isn't, Aaliyah Boston on there or somebody like that? It's pretty crazy. And she just says it. If I was the league, I'm putting Caitlin Clark on everything, basically.
But then Sophie turned the entire conversation in a direction that really set the internet completely on fire, because she didn't just attack the league's officiating and its failure to protect players. She attacked their fundamental understanding of how to run a business, how to market a product, how to make money from what they have. The WNBA released this big, glossy commemorative graphic to celebrate 30 years as a league. It's supposed to be a milestone. It's supposed to be a celebration of 3 decades of women's basketball. It's supposed to be a moment to showcase what the sport has become and where it's heading. And somehow, impossibly, the single biggest name the sport has ever produced is missing from it. Caitlin Clark, the player who's filling arenas to capacity every single night, who's moving television numbers in ways nobody in WNBA history ever has before, who's literally the primary reason casual fans are even tuning in to watch the league right now, isn't on the poster. But Sophie Cunningham is. So are Paige Buchers and Angel Reese. Good players, absolutely solid contributors to the league. But Sophie literally looked at her own face on this 30-year celebration poster and asked on air, genuinely confused, why am I on this thing and Caitlin Clark is not? What makes that moment absolutely legendary, what's going to be remembered about this whole situation, is that Sophie didn't use her own spot on the poster to celebrate herself or pad her own ego. She used it as a weapon to roast the entire league's decision-making process. Her point was brutally, undeniably simple. If you're building a graphic designed to sell your league for the next 30 years, if you're creating something meant to market the sport and showcase its best, you put your biggest draw front and center. You don't leave her out, you don't bury her, you don't stick role players in her place to fill space. That's not smart marketing. That's not even competent marketing. That's actively choosing to leave money on the table and then acting confused about why people aren't excited about your business. Sophie's actual words were sharp and unfiltered. It is a joke, it's a joke. And she didn't stop there, didn't pull back, didn't soften the blow. She went right after the decision makers, saying that this is exactly why Kathy Engelbert and the WNBA leadership get lit up on social media constantly, why fans are frustrated, why there's constant criticism. You can't put out a 30-year celebration graphic without your biggest star and then act shocked when people notice it and call you out for it. It's absurd. Then she said the part that makes league executives truly uncomfortable, the thing they never want to hear from inside the organization, the truth that cuts deepest. If they were smart, they would market the life out of their stars, but they do not. She listed who should actually be plastered everywhere, who should be the face of the league if there were any sense to the marketing strategy. Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston. These are the actual draws. These are the names that actually make people show up to games. These are the players whose faces sell tickets and move merchandise. But the league keeps forcing random choices into the spotlight instead and then acts genuinely confused when the strategy fails to generate excitement and engagement. Now there is one explanation floating around for why Clark might be missing from that poster, and it's worth acknowledging it because it's being discussed seriously. Some people in the media have pointed to possible licensing issues or image rights complications, the kind of paperwork and legal nonsense that can keep a player off official merchandise for contract reasons. Maybe that's real. Maybe there's a legitimate legal reason behind the decision. Maybe there are contracts involved. But even if that's absolutely true, it doesn't let the league off the hook. It doesn't excuse the mistake. If your single biggest star has a rights issue that keeps her off your 30-year celebration graphic, then your job is to go fix that paperwork yesterday. You find the lawyers, you make the calls, you hire the consultants, you move whatever mountains need to be moved to make it happen. A competent marketing department doesn't just shrug and give up. They don't slap a few role players on the graphic as a substitute plan. That's not a solution, that's surrender. That's admitting defeat before you even really tried. The business reality here is the thing the league keeps completely ignoring, the fundamental truth that should be obvious but apparently isn't. Caitlin Clark is the engine, she's the driver. When she's on the court, buildings fill up, TV numbers spike, people pay for tickets, merchandise sells, the entire operation hums. When she's not playing, when she's injured or resting, you can feel the energy drain out of the building like air from a balloon. This isn't opinion or speculation or something debatable. This is what the attendance numbers show. This is what the ratings prove. This is what ticket sales demonstrate every single night. So leaving her off the marketing isn't some small, neutral oversight that doesn't matter. It's not a minor decision. It's actively choosing to make less money on purpose. It's intentionally leaving revenue on the table. No other major professional league on the planet would bury its biggest attraction like this. Not the NBA, not the NFL, not Major League Baseball, not any organization that actually understands basic business principles and wants to maximize profit. You find your biggest asset and you promote it everywhere. You put it on everything. You make it impossible to escape. The WNBA seems to be doing the exact opposite of that strategy. And here's the most absurd, most revealing part of this entire situation. A player on the actual roster, a current employee, is doing the league's marketing homework for them. Live on her own podcast, for free, without being asked. And she's doing it better than the people who are literally paid six figures to do exactly that job. Sophie just identified the marketing strategy that the league should have figured out months ago. She pointed out the obvious solution to a problem that's costing the organization millions and millions in potential revenue. She made it simple, she made it clear, she made it impossible to ignore. And there's a very real chance the league turns around and fines her for providing that consulting service. That's the WNBA in a nutshell right now. Instead of thanking her for the consultation, instead of recognizing she just did their job better than they're doing it, they might punish her for saying it out loud. Instead of fixing the thing she identified, instead of acting on her advice, they'll probably just calculate how much to fine her for being right and speaking truth. Let's zoom out and look at the full context because it really does make Sophie's entire rant land even harder and make more sense. Everything connects back to the same core problem repeating itself over and over. The league has the most valuable thing it's ever had, and it's actively choosing to mismanage it at every single turn. Caitlin Clark is a once-in-a-generation talent. She's a superstar in the truest sense of the word. She's filling arenas to capacity. She's moving the needle on television in ways nobody thought was possible. She's doing things for women's basketball that seemed impossible just a few years ago. She's changing the entire landscape of the sport. And the way the league is treating that incredible gift, that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, is by letting opponents tee off on her with total impunity. They're handing out $1,000 wrist slaps when they finally get caught after embarrassment. They're leaving her off the anniversary celebration like she doesn't matter. They're keeping her face away from the marketing materials that could be printing absolutely massive amounts of money for the organization. It's like discovering oil, striking it rich, and then complaining you can't afford gas. It's like finding gold and asking why you're broke. Sophie's entire rant hit so hard and resonated with so many people precisely because it wasn't coming from an outside hater on a hot take show or some random person on Twitter with no skin in the game and nothing to lose. It was coming from a teammate, a current player, Someone still on a roster, still drawing a paycheck from the WNBA, someone with everything to lose and a very real fine probably coming for speaking this truth out loud. She had reasons to stay quiet. She had financial incentives to play it safe and keep her mouth shut. She had every reason to just go along with the program. She chose to speak anyway because she could see how badly the league was mismanaging its own future, its own asset, its own opportunity. Now, to understand the full picture and get the complete context, you have to know that this isn't just about one bad game or one officiating crew having a rough night or a single mistake in judgment. The tension between the Phoenix Mercury and the Indiana Fever has been building for weeks now. These teams genuinely do not like each other right now. There's real beef, there's real friction, and Caitlin Clark keeps ending up on the wrong end of the physical play. She keeps getting the short end of the stick. A few nights before the throat shot incident, Sophie and Phoenix veteran Dewana Bonner got into it during a game that the Fever actually won 86-77. The interaction that blew up online, that became a meme that got everyone talking, was almost comically simple in its execution. Sophie just pointed at Bonner, that's literally it. One pointed finger, no words, no trash talk, no escalation, just a point while Bonner lost her composure. The refs decided that the pointing gesture was worth a technical foul for pointing at someone. Sophie's take on that absolutely ridiculous call was perfect, was laser-focused, was exactly right. She said it was the weakest technical she'd ever seen in her entire life, that she didn't say a single word, that all she did was literally point with her finger. Meanwhile, just days later, a fist to the neck, a deliberate shot to the throat, gets nothing in real time, and then a $1,000 fine later after going viral. The priorities completely right themselves when you line those two moments up side by side. A pointed finger gets flagged immediately by the refs. A fist to the throat gets ignored until the internet shames the league into action. If that doesn't perfectly sum up the entire problem with the officiating and the lack of protection in this league, I'm not sure what does. The pointless technical foul was coming out of real in-game friction, out of genuine tension. Bonner had to be held back during the game, so the Mercury and Fever have actual animosity right now, the kind of chippy, tense energy where things are constantly on the edge and threatening to explode. Clark has been in the middle of it, and she keeps taking the physical shots, keeps absorbing the rough treatment. The point at Bonner was a tiny spark, a small moment that got flagged immediately. The throat shot a couple nights later was the explosion that finally made everyone acknowledge what's been happening all season long under the surface. It's been building, it's been escalating, and Clark keeps being the target. When you step back and look at the complete picture from start to finish, when you see the timeline and the pattern, you start to understand exactly why fans and players are absolutely furious. The league has a once-in-a-generation superstar. She fills arenas. She moves television numbers in a way nobody in this sport ever has before. She's literally changing the commercial and demographic viability of women's basketball. And the way the league treats that incredible gift is to allow opponents to physically target her, hunt her, rough her up. They hand out $1,000 fines when they finally get caught after videos go viral. They leave her name off the anniversary marketing. They keep her face away from the promotional materials that could be generating massive amounts of revenue. It's essentially striking oil and then complaining you can't afford gas. It makes no sense. It's self-sabotage. But Sophie didn't only point the finger outward at the league's failures. She turned the heat inward too, and she actually deserves credit for being honest about her own team's problems. She came right out and said the Fever's defense is horrible and that everyone in the organization already knows it. And here's the uncomfortable, undeniable part: the numbers completely back her up. There's no running from this reality. The Fever are sitting at 11-8 on the season, which sounds fine on the surface, but they're giving up around 90 points per game. In that Mercury mess where everything fell apart and went wrong, they let Phoenix hang 111 points on them. Phoenix, a team that normally averages closer to 80 points a night. When you let an 80-point offense drop 111 on you when you get outscored that badly, yeah, the defense is absolutely the problem. There's no debating it. There's no escaping that conclusion. The math is simple. And here's the spicy wrinkle that makes this criticism hit even harder and land with more weight. The Fever's head coach is Stephanie White, who's supposed to be a defensive mind. That's what she's known for. That's her entire reputation in the league. That's why she was hired. That's the thing she's supposed to excel at. So when Sophie goes on a public podcast and says the Fever's defense is horrible and everyone already knows it, she's not just making a casual observation about the team's performance statistics. Whether she's saying it intentionally or not, whether she means to or not, she's pointing directly at the coaching staff. She's putting the spotlight on the exact thing her coach is supposed to be an expert in, the thing that defines her as a coach. That's a player calling out her coach on a public platform. That's throwing the bench boss under the bus, even if it's technically just telling the truth about the statistics and the performance. The numbers tell an even bigger story when you dig deeper into them and look at what's really happening. The Fever also lead the entire league in personal fouls, hacking away at around 24 a game. That's a team that's constantly fouling opponents, constantly sending them to the free throw line, constantly killing its own momentum with undisciplined, sloppy play. And Sophie's own scoring has dipped to about 5.3 points over her last 3 games as she works mostly off the bench, not getting major minutes. So this isn't a player riding high, feeling good in a position of power and strength where she can lecture everybody else from a place of success. This is someone in the middle of a grinding season, dealing with limited minutes and lower production, struggling to contribute the way she wants to. And she's choosing to own her team's defensive flaws publicly while simultaneously calling out the league's failures. That's the kind of honesty and vulnerability that stands out from the usual player-safe talk. But here's what makes Sophie credible and keeps all of this from sounding bitter or like she's given up on the team. Underneath all the sharp criticism, underneath all the venom, she actually sounded genuinely hopeful about the team's future and potential. She didn't go on the podcast to give up on the Fever or write them off as a lost cause. She didn't walk away from her own team. She said they have all the potential in the world. She said they just haven't fully clicked yet as a unit. She said they're in the grind right now, actively trying to figure out what's going to make them work defensively, what adjustments need to be made. So this wasn't a player quitting on her squad out of frustration and anger. This was someone frustrated precisely because she can see how good this group could be if they ever locked in on defense and executed. That's a completely different energy. That's ownership. That's the kind of criticism that comes from someone who actually cares about the team's success, not someone who's given up and is just venting. The fans, meanwhile, are absolutely not cooling things down or trying to smooth over the controversy and make peace. If anything, they're amplifying it and making it louder. The poster snub turned into one of the loudest conversations the WNBA has had all week, with the league getting absolutely roasted across social media for the baffling decision. Add in the viral throat shot clip making the rounds everywhere and that laughable $1,000 fine, and you've got supporters openly asking whether the people running the league even understand what they're sitting on. When your own players and your own fan base are saying the exact same thing in the same week, saying it out loud, making noise about it, that's not a small vocal minority with fringe opinions. That's the room. That's the majority opinion. That's the consensus. You can't ignore it, even though the league seems determined to try and do exactly that. The pointing meme is part of this whole story too because it's absolutely peak Sophie, peak everything wrong with how the league operates. She pointed it to Wanna Bonner after they got into it, after there was friction between them, and somehow that simple, straightforward gesture got her a technical foul. But a fist to the throat, a deliberate blow, gets nothing in the moment and then a $1,000 fine later. The comparison is so absurd it almost feels like satire. It almost feels like a joke that someone made up to show how broken the system is. A point generates a technical, violence generates $1,000. The league's priorities couldn't be more backwards if they tried, if they actually sat down and designed the worst possible system. And it helps to understand that these two teams have genuine beef right now, not just playoff rivalry, but actual personal animosity. The pointing moment came out of real friction on the court. Bonner had to be held back by her teammates during the game, so the Mercury and Fever have been chippy and tense for weeks now, and Clark keeps ending up on the wrong end of the physical contact every single time. She keeps getting hurt, she keeps absorbing shots. The point at Bonner was a tiny spark that got flagged immediately by the refs. The throat shot a couple nights later was the explosion. Both happened in the same rivalry series. Both show the absolute inconsistency in how the league handles different situations. Both caught the attention of fans who are paying close attention to what's happening on the court and how it's being officiated. The one person who's notably staying quiet through all of this chaos and drama, through all of the controversy, of course, is Caitlin Clark herself. That's just how she operates as a person. She keeps her head down, she lets her game talk for her, she avoids making herself the story away from the court and away from basketball. That approach is actually admirable in a vacuum, genuinely. It's the kind of maturity and professionalism that gets respected and praised. It's the kind of thing that makes you look like a true professional. But here's the thing, when you're the single biggest name the sport has ever produced, when you're the engine that drives everything, sometimes somebody has to speak up when the league won't. Sometimes an insider has to acknowledge the problem out loud because the institution is too stubborn or too scared or too invested in maintaining the status quo to do it themselves. This past week, that person was Sophie Cunningham with a microphone, a podcast, and absolutely zero filter. It's almost funny how Sophie became the face of this whole situation when you really think about it and step back. She's a guard coming off the bench. She's not a star in the traditional sense. She's the meme of the week with the pointing moment that went viral. She's a name on a 30-year anniversary poster that she openly thinks she has no business being on. And yet she's the one delivering the most honest league review that anybody has heard in years. The marquee stars stay diplomatic and careful with their words, measuring every sentence. The commissioner stays quiet. The energy guard with nothing to lose just says what everyone's thinking, what everyone's feeling, what everyone already knows but nobody is willing to say out loud. That's main character behavior. That's the kind of thing people remember and talk about years from now. So here's where things stand right now in this moment. A superstar is getting physically battered and roughed up without adequate protection from the league that's supposed to be governing the sport. A defense is getting torched night after night with no immediate answers and no real corrections being made. A marketing plan is actively ignoring its own goldmine of talent and revenue like it doesn't exist. And one guard decided she was done staying polite about all of it. She decided she was done playing it safe. She grabbed a microphone and said what a lot of people have been thinking and whispering about in private. She did it knowing there's probably a fine coming. She did it knowing there could be consequences. That takes real conviction. That takes courage. That's not something you do lightly. The real reason Sophie's rant resonated with so many people and caught fire online is that it wasn't coming from an outside voice on a hot take show making inflammatory statements about the league from the outside. It was coming from an insider telling the truth. It was coming from a teammate saying that the biggest star in the building is getting roughed up without protection and ignored at the same time, and the people in charge keep finding new creative ways to mismanage the most valuable thing they've ever possessed. She said it knowing it might cost her. She said it knowing there could be real consequences. She said it anyway because it needed to be said. The contrast is striking when you really think about it. Caitlin Clark changes the entire sport. She generates revenue, she fills stadiums, she moves TV ratings, she brings new fans to women's basketball, she's the engine, she's the future, and how does the league treat her? It lets her get hunted, it hands out minimal fines when she gets roughed up, it leaves her off the anniversary poster. It fails to market her face and her talent. It's like someone was given a Ferrari and decided to park it in the garage. It doesn't make sense from any business perspective. Meanwhile, Sophie Cunningham, a bench guard who would be the first to admit she's not the draw that Clark is on the poster. And she used her platform, her spot on that poster, to point out how backwards the whole thing is. She used her visibility to shine a light on the problems. She used her voice to speak for the player who's chosen to stay silent. That's leadership. That's someone who gets it. The question now becomes what happens next from here. Will anybody in the league office actually listen to what Sophie said and take it seriously? Or will they just start calculating how much to fine her for being right and speaking truth to power? Will they fix the officiating and actually protect their stars? Will they finally figure out how to market Caitlin Clark effectively and put her face everywhere? Will they give her the protection she deserves as the biggest name in the sport? Or will they treat this like they treat everything else? By reacting slowly after the fact, by applying band-aid solutions to systemic problems, by pretending the issue doesn't exist until it's impossible to ignore anymore? One bench guard with a microphone just did the league's marketing homework for them, called out the refs better than the officiating supervisors ever have, and criticized her own team with more honesty than probably any player in the league right now. The question now is whether anyone in the league office is actually listening to what she said, or whether they're too busy figuring out how much to fine her for speaking truth. That's the real story underneath all of this drama and controversy. The league has a genuine chance to prove Sophie wrong by taking immediate action and fixing the problems. Or it can prove her completely right by continuing to mismanage and mistreat the best thing it's ever had. Here's what we know right now in this moment. A generational talent is being physically targeted on the court. The league's response is so weak it's laughable. A guard on her own team had to go on a podcast and do the league's marketing job better than the people getting paid millions to do it. The league's response to that will probably be calculating a fine. Sophie pointed out the obvious: put your biggest star on the poster, protect her on the court, market her face everywhere, and somehow that's controversial. Somehow that's something the league has to think about. Somehow that's something that needs to be studied and considered. The real tragedy here is that Sophie shouldn't have had to say any of this. The league should have figured it out on its own. The officiating should protect the stars. The marketing should feature the biggest draws. The coaches should fix what's broken, but they didn't, they haven't, they're not, so a bench guard did their job for them. The question going forward isn't whether Sophie was right, she was. The question is whether anyone in charge has the courage and the sense to actually listen. Because right now, the WNBA has a once-in-a-generation star, a player who could make the sport legitimate and massive. And instead of protecting her, marketing her, and building around her, the league keeps fumbling the opportunity. Sophie called it out, the internet called it out, the fans are calling it out. The question now is whether the people running the league will finally listen, or whether they'll just keep proving Sophie right by continuing to do everything wrong. The clock is ticking, the opportunity won't last forever. What happens next is entirely up to them.